Hi everyone, I'm just going to be giving you a bit of a look at my 3D printer and just going to talk about a couple of the the good things and the bad things I've run into, and just give you kind of almost like a little review, but not, because I'm not experienced in this. I've only been printing since I've got this printer, and a little bit before that in a kind of hackerspace. But I've never really had much experience with other printers other than I've tried the Mk2 about 5 or 6 prints. So I've never really had that much experience, but I can just talk about how this was as a kind of person new to 3D printing. So the build process I have got a big live stream of. The whole thing I live streamed, and it took almost exactly 12 hours, and then by the end of that I still hadn't finished, I hadn't printed anything. It was another couple of hours until I had finished all the calibrations properly, because there are some things like the probe, which is on the side of this, there, that little silver probe in the middle detects the bed, and that will help to automatically kind of find where it needs to be printing, because it puts one layer down at a time, and then it prints the next and the next. And if it doesn't get the first one okay, it won't stick to this bed, and then it will just end up with a pile of spaghetti, and you'll end up with lots of bits of plastic like that just come out like a mess. So the probe I had to adjust for a little bit, and then once that was calibrated, I printed a couple of little bits and bobs perfectly kind of quickly. And I think the first of those, I'll just get a couple of the prints. I'll stick them down there. The first print I did was this one, and this is just the Prusa logo, which is the printer name, Prusa. And this one was a very simple print and took about 20 minutes, and this was very good for letting me figure out where kind of how well it should be stuck down. So you should be able to see there on the plastic, you can see lots of nice little lines, and that's kind of exactly what you want, is to have a print where you can see all the different kind of individual lines on the bottom, but you don't want them completely separated and spread out. And yeah, so that was the first print I did, which was a fairly simple print really, and took not very much time, but I was really pleased with that, because it came out really well. You can see the top layers there look reasonably good. It's not completely smooth, obviously, because it has to put down a layer of filament and just join that up as much as it can. So it doesn't ever come out looking completely immaculate. It does look like it's been 3D printed. The next day I printed a couple of things, which I think one of was this little benchmark. This is called the 3D Benchy, and I'll try and get it as well in focus as possible. And this one came out really well. There's lots of little tests, so there's like an overhanging bit, there's little bridge sections across the front of the window here, there's some writing on the bottom, and there's some writing on the back, which actually is a bit difficult to read, but that's kind of expected. But yeah, this came out really well, which I was really pleased with. I was glad that I had a printer that seemed to be working okay. And then I did lots and lots of other prints. I printed the giant big dragon, the Ada Linda dragon. That I haven't got with me, that's in my old flat. And I ended up doing lots and lots of little prints, and they all seem to be coming out okay. And to begin with, I was printing only in the grey, which is the filament this printer ships with, and I have that in a box. I've got the rest of it here, and that's Prusa PLA, and PLA is a kind of simple to print with material. It's not It's not very durable, it's not very robust, but it does the job and it prints really, really easily, which is why it's used, because it's very convenient. So if you're printing little models and things like this, they'll come out fine. One little thing that I thought was really kind of an interesting print was this little catapult. I can try and put links down in the description. This one's a little catapult, and you actually pull it down and it loads, and then if you hold it you can click the button and it will catapult back up. And this prints as one piece, the whole thing. Prints in one piece. It's all one connected thing. And I thought this was fantastic. It was so cool to be able to have something that was so mechanical. Well, not so mechanical, but something mechanical that I kind of printed in one go. Because until that point, I'd only printed little ornaments and things that were just small kind of bits and knickknacks. One thing I did print with this filament was this. I'll try and get this in focus because it's quite small. There you go. So this is a coin that I modelled in Fusion 360, and this is a Japanese coin model from the board game Tokaido, is where I copied the design from. And all I kind of did to get this was I went online, looked up a picture of the coin, and then after importing that picture into the 3D modelling program, I could just draw around it and kind of sketch it, I suppose, or trace it. And then once you've got the vectors in the 3D design program, I just extruded it into a three-dimensional object and kind of made it the right depth and the right sizes and stuff. And I printed this, which took about 10 minutes, which for something that small is a bit ridiculous. But I might give that another go soon, because it's actually quite a nice model. It's about coin size, and it just looks really, really good. But the only thing is that there are little imperfections. You might be able to see there's a few little gaps. There you go. You can see there's a few little gaps where it's printed a bit kind of bodge, and that's just partly because of the design. This side's come out okay because the bottom layer squishes down quite a lot, whereas the top layers don't squish that much, so they don't fill gaps as much. So there's a bit of kind of problematic top. So I need to kind of edit the file slightly just so I can get that to look perfect. But I thought I'd print that because then I could end up having a selection of actual coins for the Tokaido game, which I thought would be really, really, really cool to be able to have, like actual coins. Other than that, that was all I printed with the Prusa PLA. Very soon after that, after getting my printer, I ordered a couple of rigid ink PLAs, and I ordered white PLA. I also ordered a PET with PETG, and that was in translucent orange, and that's what's up here. And it's a really, really nice filament. But then I ran into lots of problems. Different filaments require different temperatures and need almost to be calibrated differently, I suppose you'd say. And basically I ran into quite a lot of problems with things not coming out okay. Things were warping. You might have some failed bits and bobs down here. Yeah, I've got a couple of bits that failed. I had lots of problems with things that just weren't coming out okay, and I ended up with some bits that were like melting and just not coming out very well at all. So it was kind of a bit disappointing when things weren't working okay. But other than that, it was fine. I just had quite a few problems printing because it wasn't once it stuck and was definitely stuck down properly. That was okay, but I had quite a few problems with a print kind of peeling off. So halfway through a print, it would start lifting up, just because plastic will bend slightly if it cools and contracts. So eventually I managed to sort out the warping problems, and that was when I printed these towers. I printed one in PLA, which is the white one, and one in PETG, which is the orange one on the left. And these both came out really, really well, and what this allowed me to do was print the bottom layer at whatever the bottom layer was, but then after that I could change the temperature in about 5-degree increments, and each of these repeating patterns came out with a slight kind of difference. It's probably impossible to tell from this video, but basically you could see a very small difference in the layers. I think it was slightly more prominent in this one. If I zoom in, I might be able to try and get it. But basically the one on the left is slightly more reflective. You can kind of see this one's slightly more shiny, and that one's kind of dull. And it lets you kind of test temperatures, so you can then try to improve how your print quality will come out, or how the look of your model will come out. So it's a kind of simple test, but it takes about 2 hours to print these towers. But the towers kind of were good because what I didn't do is what I should have done, which is once I got my printer set up, is to calibrate things quite well. And instead, I just bought lots of filament, started printing, and thought, oh, I'll just use these temperatures, they'll be fine. But it wasn't. It was definitely not fine, and I ended up having lots and lots of failed prints. I'll put a picture up now of a big complicated print I did, which was the Portal Companion Cube, and it was printed in 40 pieces, and it says you should just be able to print 5 different parts in the required numbers. So if you're printing a corner, you print 8 corners, because there's 8 corners in the cube. So that should have just been one print for 8 parts, but instead I ended up having to run each individual piece of that 40 part print, and it took about a week and a half to print everything because of having limited time printing stuff, and it was just not nice. I had to spend so much time printing it, it kind of just got annoying. But then after doing that, I kind of started printing in this PETG, and this is a really, really nice filament. In a way, I seem to prefer it. It seems to stick to the bed really, really well. Almost too well, so much so that to get some of these small pieces off, I had to use a knife to kind of scrape right underneath it to try and kind of pop it off the bed. Just because it sticks really, really well, which is good, because it means you can print well and have a print that comes out okay. It also looks really cool. This is a spinner. This is a spinner, and it's just lots of bearings and one little print that before you've put the bearings in just looks like that. But these spinners worked really well. They fitted the bearings perfectly fine. But I've been printing these, and these the PETG that I used was just so much kind of nicer. It seemed to stick really, really well. And I'll show you the first layer, just because it looks perfect. You should be able to see that. It's not had to be completely squished flat like the PELA had to. This PETG is slightly stickier, so when you're printing it will stick to things better than the PLA, which has allowed it to print them much easier, and it's not had to squish it as much. And the problem when you squish a print down, can't really see it on anything, but I suppose maybe on this. So on this temperature tower, the first layer you can see quite easily on that corner is squished. The first layer, which was this bit on the bottom, squishes down quite a lot because it had to in order to stick, and that meant it's got that little lip on the bottom, whereas the PETG sticks so well it didn't need that. So the PETG tower, I think this one I did actually have quite squished, but then I unsquished that through, you can change the height of the prints, but it ended up that the PETG seems to be the one I like printing with, which is, I suppose, good, but it's slightly more expensive, only slightly though. But yeah, it's been a really nice kind of printer so far. The problem I ran into is after calibrating it, and I mentioned right at the beginning of this video that I had to try and calibrate this probe on the side, and to begin with I hadn't got it set up properly, and I ended up causing this problem where the nozzle was digging into the bed, and hopefully that's just replaceable, because the top of this, I'll try and show you. The top of the bed, you can see there's a little sheet of kind of stuff on top, and that is something you can replace, and it only costs about £7 to replace that whole sheet, so it shouldn't be an expensive replacement. And hopefully the bed itself isn't broken, it's just the plastic on top, which I'd like to think is the case. But it's kind of blistered, so it's actually kind of raised. I'm not going to be able to really show you that. It's raised up, which means if you try and print on that, it kind of doesn't like it. It'll bump over it. The nozzle will bump that layer because it's a very chunky. It's a very chunky kind of bit. So yeah, I need to fix that at some point. But it's fine as long as I'm not printing on that part of the bed, which is very rare. I don't think I'm going to print something that big for a while. And most of the time it's not going to be a complete square, so if it's something that needs to be printed that way, I can just rotate it and have it so it doesn't print on this part, which is fine. But that's basically the only problem I ran into. Although saying that, there is actually another thing. I printed a Lapras model for one of my friends, and it was fairly big. It was going to take up kind of a reasonable chunk. It was about kind of that wide, about 10 centimeters wide, maybe, bit bigger. And halfway through that print, it skipped a step. So as it printed, it started printing like here, and then it skips, and it ends up printing over here. So it had like a body, and then suddenly the neck came out kind of wonky. And that was a bit annoying, because it obviously ruined a print that had taken overnight. But it was fine, it didn't waste much filament, and the filament is cheap anyway, so it's not like a problem. Plus I think it taught me what that problem was. So it ended up that I had it slightly calibrated wrong, and the bed needed realigning. So the bed, relative to this frame, the bed was sitting slightly like that, or like that, I can't remember which way, but it was slightly wonky, and I had to lower it, and then that fixed that digging in issue. Because what it was is it was measuring this side, then it measured the middle, then it measured this side, and it kind of was okay here, but then it got to this bit and was like digging in lots, and I didn't notice until like a couple of minutes. Well, not a couple of minutes. I didn't notice straight away. I was not paying attention, so it ended up causing a bit of a problem. But that's fine. I can deal with that. But yeah, so it's been really good. I've been printing lots and lots of little bits and bobs, because it's kind of satisfying to find something online and go, that looks cool, I'll print it, and then a couple of hours later you've got it. So like these spinners, I found the designs for them was on Thingiverse, and shortly after printing them I got the bearings delivered from Amazon, and they're just a little fidgety toy, so you can spin them around. They're not quite as smooth as I expected. I think that's because the bearings have grease in them that isn't the best idea. You need to clean them out so it's as smooth as possible with as little resistance. But they're nice and fun to play with. And I've just got one of these at the moment. I have got some other bearings. I ordered 16 of these blue ones, but then I ordered some apparently better ones that were a little bit more expensive. It was like £8 for 16 bearings, so 50p each. So these cost about £2 per spinner, but these ones were about £5 for 16. But I think they're not going to be quite as good. They don't, from what the rating of the bearing says, they're not going to be quite as slick. But it's been a kind of a nice process of learning. I've kind of got to know my printer. I know what it can do. I know what it can't do. It's really been enjoyable printing upgrades to my printer. So I printed this, which is like a filament guide, this bit here. And before that, your filament would just like, if it unravelled, so if the filament for some reason was pushed back, it would start to unravel and pop off the side of the spool. Another thing is I printed that grey piece that goes through the spool, and that just makes the spool much more secure, which is good, because otherwise you just had these orange pieces on the side have a small, like 1/2 centimetre prong that sticks into the spool, and you have to like push this right up against it, whereas this is much smoother and much better, I think. And this piece guides the filament, so it stops the filament from kind of unravelling to either side, which is kind of much better. And I also printed that piece on top of where the filament goes in. There. And that is a thing that has a piece of sponge in, so I'll just zoom in so you can see it better. You should be able to see the sponge in that. There you go. And that basically rubs the filament as it goes in and wipes the dust off, so it stops the end of the printer from absorbing any dust or putting any dust. And I guess that could help with a blockage if you end up squishing pieces of dust into your printer. So yeah, it's been kind of interesting, kind of printing practical things. Another thing I've done is I've printed a thing for my watch to sit on, which my watch is there. It's not charging at the moment, but it's so when I charge my watch, I can have it sitting on this stand that's kind of a nice little cool looking stand. Another thing I tried to do, and I did actually succeed in doing this, but I kind of decided it wasn't going to be very useful at the moment. I tried out a thing called Octopi or Octoprint, which is people that do 3D printing probably know, but anyone who's watching this that doesn't really do 3D printing might want to know. It's a kind of sets up a Raspberry Pi as a server for your printer, so it allows you to, from either your local network, or if you set it up properly, you can have it anywhere in the world on the internet. You can connect your printer, have it connect to a webcam that you just plug into the Raspberry Pi, and you can watch and control your printer, including just print stuff. You can just download something on your phone and then upload it to the website and then print it and watch your print being done. Which the principle of that is amazing, but I, in a way, don't like it, because if your print goes wrong, you've got to then cancel it and wait till it's done anyway. So it just allows you to print on demand when you're not at your printer. So it's kind of an odd thing. So I ended up realising that I'm actually not bothered, because I'm not going to print when I'm not at home. I did for a few days try printing from my computer, which I don't think makes any actual difference to printing, but it does let you kind of have a display on your computer with a bit more information about how the print's going and like live graphs of temperatures and stuff. So I've got a USB cable plugged into the back of my computer, which is good, but again, I've just resorted to using an SD card reader and putting stuff on the SD card, because then you can just print without having to have your computer on. You can do whatever, but it just makes it a bit simpler to have it from an SD card. So yeah, in summary, the printer's fantastic. The filament confused me for a short time, and then I figured out how to not mess up the new filaments. And yeah, I've printed these, and after printing these calibration pieces, it kind of gave me a better idea of what temperatures to be using for each filament type, and then that allowed me to print more reliably. And I think I kind of scared myself after causing that big problematic print with the companion cube failing so much. But then I kind of eventually got my prints working, and ended up printing some things. Got another little tiny print here. It's a tiny cubone head. Cubone's, the skull of Cubone's mother, I think it is. and that came out really well. And the interesting thing was I had lots of problems printing this, and it actually had to print standing upright, like that, which I thought was crazy, but because there's no flat edge, there's nowhere convenient to print it, so I probably could have printed it that way and that might have come out a bit better, but it balanced on its nose, and I had quite a few problems where it would print and just end up being pushed back and forth and rocked, so I had to cancel that, and the 5th attempt worked. But I tried to use support material, and the support material didn't really work. But yeah, so in summary, the printer's great. I have not got much experience, therefore I ran into a few problems, which now I've run into, I'm kind of better at dealing with. So hopefully it's going to be an okay printer. It's been very reliable once I've got the settings tuned. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions or anyone wants me to print something just to try it out, let me know, because I'm happy to print everything. It's good having people be like, oh, can you print me something, because then it makes me do it. Whereas if I was left to my own devices, I'll probably slowly kind of run out of things I want to print. So it helps me kind of think of new cool things to print if people suggest it. But yeah, thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and I'll probably end up maybe having some time lapses of builds or of prints, sorry. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you've got any comments or anything. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.